So you've met someone and are headed towards marriage, but you're wondering, what if I can do better? Why do we have these thoughts and how do we solve them?
I just don't think about it.
You just don't think about it?
Yeah,
You just barrel through?
straight through.
Is that how you married me?
Right, exact on.
Oh, it's an interesting way to find out.
Straight through.
So let's get into it. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Muslim Marriage Podcast, where we show you how to find and build a healthy marriage as a Muslim. I'm Zahra Hassan.
And I'm AJ, and we've been married for 3.5 years. And if you like our videos, please comment and subscribe. Ask your questions below, and you may feature in one of our videos.
And as a thank you, if you haven't already, there is a link below for a free compatibility guide for you to download in the description, In Shaa Allah. So this week's episode is entitled, What If I Can Do Better? We're going to go through where these thoughts come from and how to solve them, In Shaa Allah. And that brings us to the question.
The question.
The question. As usual, this is coming from the Muslim Marriage subreddit. A brother asks, Assalamu alaikum. I found myself in a situation I never expected and could really use some guidance. I've been blessed to find a potential spouse, alhamdulillah, but ever since this development, I've been struggling with something I thought I had under control, lowering my gaze. Before this, I was fairly good at maintaining appropriate boundaries and keeping my focus, but now that marriage feels like a real possibility, I find myself suddenly hyper aware of other potential options. It's like my mind keeps whispering, what if there's someone better, even though I know this kind of thinking isn't right. I feel guilty because I have a good potential match in front of me, but I'm letting Shaitan plant these doubts. Sometimes when I'm out, I catch myself looking at other sisters and imagining what if scenarios. I know this isn't fair to my potential spouse or to myself. Has anyone dealt with this? How did you overcome these feelings and stay committed to your choice? I want to do things the right way and be the best husband I can be, but these thoughts are really testing my resolve. Jazaa K'Allah Khayr for your advice. So what are your thoughts?
My immediate thought is that he's not convinced that she's the actual choice for him, that she's the one. I think it's him trying to convince his self-conscious or his self-conscious trying to convince him that something feels off about this. They're not married yet.
Yes.
Right? My suggestion to him would be to not go through with the marriage if he's already worried about what if someone else is better, right?
Yeah.
You would know. You have, as a guy, you would have that feeling of, yes, this is the one.
Yeah.
And you should only ever go through with the marriage with that understanding of, yes, this is the one. If you have any feeling less than that, then it's not going to work out down the line, I feel.
Okay, that makes sense, but what do you think he means by better? What if you can do better? What if you can find someone better? What does better mean?
He's either telling everyone else that he believes that he's settling, like he thinks that he's out of her league, or he legitimately thinks that, I don't know, like he's just not attracted to some aspect of her, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe there's something about her, could be personality, could be something that he doesn't like and wants someone better.
The fact that what he's mentioned here is that this is resulting in a difficulty with lowering his gaze. Okay, so this is a big assumption, but I'm assuming that means that he's talking about physical attractiveness. Right? That's what he means. Because that's what he means by lowering his gaze and considering other potentials as what if scenarios.
Yeah.
What if I was with that woman or that woman or that woman? So I'm just going to make that assumption. It could be completely incorrect. The word better can mean anything. He didn't specify specifically, so it can mean anything. We're just going to go ahead with that assumption. It's important what better means.
Yeah.
Yeah. Given that I'm going to assume that it means physical attractiveness, because that tends to be the metric by which the measure of a woman is valued in the marriage market, is how physically attractive she is. There are other characteristics, specifically the ones that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam outlined. You know, a woman is married for her beauty, her family, her money, and her religion, right? I believe those were the four characteristics, if I'm
Yeah.
right? But the one in today's marriage market that seems to be what all the
Predominant.
the gurus and everyone is talking about is physical attractiveness. So he is measuring, if it is physical attractiveness he's talking about, he's measuring the whether or not he's settling based on a metric that is accepted by society, that this is how valuable your wife is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting. What do you think about that?
I think he's measuring on the wrong scale.
Yeah.
You know? Like, he's measuring on the Geiger counter scale, right? Like how radiant she is.
Oh.
What he should be measuring on is the Richter scale.
Oh.
Right? Like, how much does she shake him to her core?
Oh, so that's a very sweet. I thought you were going to go a different direction with that. I like the direction that you went in much better.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a wonderful way to look at it. And similarly, of course, if it was a sister who was asking about a brother, whether or not she's settling, the traditional way, not traditional, the accepted societal value of a man today is measured in terms of his income. Yeah. How much money and assets that he has. So everything that we were saying in terms of this brother and sister, you can flip it with, and as if it was a sister asking about a brother, whether or not she's settling for lesser lifestyle quality because of how much money that he makes, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we come to where do these thoughts come from? Why do people have these thoughts? As Muslims, our first answer is going to be that it comes from the shaitan.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, that's probably where it is coming from, and that's probably a big part of the equation. But given what I do, and having been paying attention to people over the last, I think 7 years at this point, I have some ideas of why we have these thoughts. Do you have an idea
of why people have these thoughts?
Yeah, that they meet somebody who is, by all
accounts and purposes,
is a good match, is compatible, is a good character, all the things we talk about, but they're still having these thoughts in their back of their mind that I might be settling for this individual. So where do you think these thoughts are coming from?
I think it's got to do with Western media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just the exposure to all these different types of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
whole concept of marriage being a ball and chain, wherein people now are seeing marriage as locked down to one person, right? Even the Muslims are thinking that way.
Yeah.
Not for the most part, but the folks that are born and raised and just don't think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and then suddenly now your focus on life has shifted, has changed, and you start becoming materialistic.
You have hit on all of the points that I have written down here in terms of where my thoughts are. It's weird. Did you look at my notes?
No, I'm just a genius like that. Alhamdulillah.
Tabarakallah. Very impressive. Okay, so why do we think this way? The short answer is, in my opinion, social media, right? Before, if this was, 40 years ago and somebody was being asked this question, their short answer might have been television, mainstream media, right? Just widespread sharing of culture, sharing of images of what life can be, and at the same time sharing images of what life should be. Like, this is the ideal, and if you have less than that, then you haven't met the ideal.
Yeah.
And with social media, with the phones being in our hands, and people just on such a wide scale are sharing a version of their lives that may or may not be true, that has just taken that idea and just put it to the max, right? What do kids say? 10x'd it, right? So they've 10x'd it or 1000x'd it. So I think that we are wired to worry about how we're being evaluated by others. There's this idea in psychology that's called the imaginary audience effect. Usually it happens in adolescence, right? So teenagers. And it's this idea that you are subconsciously, you feel like there's a spotlight on you and that everybody around is looking at you, and not only looking at you, judging you. It's just constantly evaluating you. Like if you think back to the years when you were a teenager, do you remember feeling that way, that other people were constantly paying attention to you, what you were wearing, how you were talking, etc.?
Yeah, I had that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I did have that feeling.
Yeah.
But I just didn't bother to fix anything.
Yes, Tabarakallah, you're the ideal that we all aspire to. But those lesser of us, it was a big part of my adolescence and probably into my early 20s that I felt like what I was doing was being judged. So what is it that people are judging? They're judging your sense of worth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us into the second concept, which I think ties into this one, which is the idea of materialism, that you mentioned. So materialism, right, is this idea that your worth is based on the value of your possessions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the more valuable or more expensive your possessions are, or higher quality and accepted scale of quality that your possessions are, the more worth that you have as a person. Okay, so if you put the two ideas together, this idea that I'm being evaluated all the time based on the worth of my possessions,
Mm-hmm.
that can tie into all areas of your life. So that's why sometimes people, they feel self-conscious when they're being asked about, well, what do you do for a living? Because in your mind, you're like, I'm about to be judged based on whether or not the job that I have or the income that I have measures up to whether or not if it's valuable.
Yeah.
And this idea of materialism. What car do you drive? Where do you live? All of these questions. And that also ties into your spouse, your choice of spouse. So with these two ideas there, and both of them feeding into each other and then being amplified by this social media, by being constantly exposed to all the different ways that what you have isn't enough, right? That is going to feed into your choice of spouse. So if you're a young man, like this young gentleman, and you are marrying this woman, and you're worried that her level of attractiveness, which is what I'm assuming he means by better, doesn't measure up to his standards, and by extension to the standards of others, that's a dangerous metric.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a dangerous metric. And he might be thinking about, well, what if other people see her as my wife? They're going to be thinking, well, why? How did she get him? Or maybe they start thinking lesser of him, etc. And similarly, if you as a young woman are marrying a gentleman and you're thinking, well, maybe he's not as either people are not going to think he's very handsome, or people are going to think that he doesn't have as much money.
Mm-hmm.
And you're concerned about the perceived value of this individual based on the standards set by materialism. That's this is all something that happens in the subconscious.
Huge problems.
Yes, that translates into our actual choice of spouse, and I see it all the time with clients, all the time. I also I also have close relationships with some matchmakers, and they tell me that this is also a concern whenever they have clients and they present to them different options of matches. It's a concern, right? So we've spoken about in length that physical attractiveness is very important. Financial compatibility is very important. These things are important.
Mm-hmm.
But if the standard that you're setting is set by social media, who can live up to that standard?
Not many people.
I know I can't. Right? So
well, okay, you're wrong about that.
I appreciate that.
No, you're wrong about that.
All right, so I measure up to that standard for one person. I'm to you, right? And I appreciate that.
I'll put it this way.
Yeah.
I don't know why you agreed to marry me.
Likewise. But what I'm saying is that's the if that's the standard that you're setting is a standard that's unmeetable. Okay, so let's say that you meet somebody who can meet the standard. And this is the criteria by which you're choosing a spouse. Is it why would it not be a good idea to do it this way?
Are you looking for just the one criteria?
No, let's say if the criteria, the meter stick or yardstick, depending on where you live, that you're using to measure whether this person is a good match for what you are looking for, is based on societal perception of their value, right? So their attractiveness, how much money they make, which family they come from, etc. Why would it not be a good idea to use these?
Because it's not a good idea Islamically. Like a society seems secular in that case.
Yeah, but I think this is a human trait that's always existed, but now is much more pervasive because of the extent of the reach of social media. Right, more people have it in their hands. More people are exposed to these standards.
Yeah.
So these standards have become globalized.
The thing is, it exists in human nature, but secular society amplifies it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And Islam suppresses it, right?
Yeah.
Islam makes it so that a person's piety, right, is forefront.
Yeah.
Right? All the different factors that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ spoke about when you're looking for a spouse.
Yeah.
Right? But how many followers or how many likes you have?
Yeah.
That doesn't qualify or quantify anything.
Yeah, no, exactly. And in terms of why it's not a good idea to use that as your meter stick is because the question then becomes, well, what is your goal, right? If your goal is to please other people, then yeah, maybe that's a good idea for you. But if the goal is to have a successful, happy, healthy marriage, then you're not paying attention to the things that matter there. So, for example, let me give an analogy. Let's say you wanted to live in a house, right? You have this deep want and need to live in a house. But when it comes time to look for a place to live, you're only looking at condos, right? You're going to end up living in a condo. Like that's there's a mismatch. Exactly. There's a mismatch between your criteria and what it is that you actually want. So if your criteria is pleasing society, if what you want to do is please society, then your criteria are matching up, and that's what you'll probably end up doing.
Yeah.
But if what you want in the end is a happy, healthy marriage, then these aren't the right criteria.
Yeah, exactly.
The criteria are the ones that we've been speaking about all the previous episodes. The one that goes through it in detail, I believe, is how to choose a spouse. And those are the better criteria. Let's give another analogy. If you walk into a store and you're trying to buy a piece of clothing, right? A shirt. You're trying to buy a shirt. Well, then you have to ask yourself, what kind of shirt do I want? Do I want the one that is the most expensive, right? That is the most expensive, that has, that high-end label on it, that priced with the biggest price tag, or do I want the one that fits me best? Because it's unlikely that the two are one and the same. Yeah. So when it comes to where do these thoughts come from, we went through a little bit. I think it has to do with social media, particularly when it comes to this idea that we are worried about how we're being evaluated by other people, and that we're worried that other people are evaluating based on the value of the possessions that we have, right? And that feeding into our choice of spouse. I think that subconsciously that's where this comes from, and how to solve it. Well, how do you start addressing this?
Essentially, what you got to do is you got to tell the person flat out. You got to say, hey, I know you're pretty, but that's not the end all be all of what I'm looking for. Be very certain the fact that I'm choosing you is because you've told me that you've made amazing food in the kitchen. Like, I'm just so excited, right? You have to make sure that you lay down the foundation
Mm-hmm. From
so
the
that they
beginning.
don't take advantage of you.
From the very beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. We never had that conversation.
I feel like we should.
I think we're having it now. Okay. But in terms of how to solve it, right? I think there are two things you can do. The first thing that you can do is understanding where these thoughts come from. So if you're here and you made it this far into the podcast, that congratulations, that part's done, right? And it's important to understand that these are just my ideas. There are other ideas that are out there. People have done studies on this. So you can go and look into those. And also a big part of it might be related to the shaitan. But the first part of how to start to address these thoughts is understanding where they come from.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The second part of how to address these thoughts is to evaluate whether the criteria, it's what we've already talked about, whether the criteria that you are looking for in a spouse match up with what it is that you want. What is it that you actually want? And to be honest with yourself about that, right? And to be honest whether or not the two of them are aligned and consistent. If what it is that you want is a happy, healthy marriage, then the criteria are going to be different. And yes, physical attractiveness is very important. But if you make your standard, my standard for physical attractiveness is supermodel or IG model or whichever social media platform you're on, that level of model, it's going to be very hard to find someone who meets that standard and also will be capable of helping you build a happy, healthy marriage with you that is a good match for you. Right? So see whether or not the criteria line up. And we've already spoken about with respect to physical attractiveness, how much. Well, then the brother might say, well, okay, then, well, how do I know whether this person is physically attractive enough for me to move forward with marriage? What we spoke about in previous episodes is that you need somebody you're physically attractive enough to be able to lower your gaze. So the fact that this brother began the question by saying, I have met this potential and I have this new problem that I'm no longer able to lower my gaze.
Yeah, that's a problem.
I immediately knew, okay, maybe she's not physically attractive enough for him. But it's also important to be honest with yourself about that, but to also not to set a standard that is unattainable, right? So how much physical attractiveness is enough to lower your gaze and enough to be their spouse. Yeah, to be their
spouse.
Though
realistically, you should be lowering the gaze at any stage of physical attractiveness.
Of course, but it's different. Like it's different when you are married to your spouse.
Yeah.
It becomes an additional layer of protection. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, additional layer of protection. So that's what it is. That's what I mean by lowering the gaze. That it's less of a test.
Yeah.
Yeah, less of a test, In Shaa Allah. That's how much you need. In terms of financial compatibility, there are not many billionaires or millionaires that are out there that are going to be compatible with everyone.
There aren't even that many heirs.
At all, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to set a standard for financial compatibility that makes sense to you and your lifestyle. If you are a millionaire, okay, go forward, find another millionaire.
If you're a thousandaire,
find another thousandaire, right? But set a financial standard that makes sense, that allows you to live a lifestyle that you're at least used to, right? But is not to the standard of social media, right? Be realistic in that sense. If the person that you are interested in for the purpose of marriage, if that's what's making you hesitate, and you're being honest with yourself, be honest with yourself whether or not the standard is meetable in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? It could just be that you're genuinely not compatible, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But make it so that other people can be compatible with you. Yeah. So hopefully, In Shaa Allah, that's clear. We spoke about mostly physical attractiveness and financial compatibility. But sometimes you'll have a client who'll come to me and they'll wonder about, well, I don't know if I can do better in terms of finding somebody who is more emotionally available. Or I don't know if I can do better of in terms of finding somebody who is securely attached, or finding somebody just who is more capable, has a better capacity to build a happy, healthy marriage. That's a wonderful, right? That's wonderful. If you're worried that this person that you're talking to might not have the capacity, the ability to be able to build a healthy marriage with you, definitely that's a yes, you could probably find someone better.
You can absolutely find someone better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why he's asking on Reddit.
We all ask. You've never asked the question on Reddit?
A question like that?
Any
like,
question on Reddit?
This person that I'm about to marry does not spark joy.
Okay.
That's a wild question to ask.
Well, of course he's gonna ask Reddit because he wants to know whether or not this is a normal. Whether or not this is a normal
no,
thought.
It's. I don't think it's normal at all.
I think it's a common thought, right? It's a common thought.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, and what's important is what is it that you think that you can do better in?
Did Marge ever have a question like that? Like,
Marge
she
Simpson?
thinks she can do better
Than Homer?
Yeah. She's always going on about like, oh, homie.
I haven't seen all the episodes, but possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. But In Shaa Allah, hopefully we've been able to answer this gentleman's question of why, like whether or not this is a common thought, where do these thoughts come from, and how to start to address them. Is there anything we're missing?
For the record, I think that he should not marry her.
Well, yeah, probably. Because of what he said in the very first sentence, that I have decided to marry this woman and now I'm having trouble lowering my gaze.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an indication that maybe they're not compatible in terms of attractiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe he's not setting his standard too high, but the purpose of this episode is to encourage people to be honest with themselves about the standards that they're setting for their future spouse, whether or not are these realistic standards that are being set by you, or are they unrealistic standards being set by social media?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's something I know that I struggled with when I was younger, and a lot of people do, both men and women. But because all of these conversations are happening within us on the subconscious plane, it's very helpful and useful to bring it out to the forefront, literally the forefront, conscious plane, and to start to address them there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I've given enough of a lecture.
That was fantastic.
I appreciate that. That brings us to the end of this episode. If you have made it here this far, Jazaa K'Allah Khayr, we sincerely appreciate you from wherever it is you're coming in the world. I believe last week, a large number of our listeners were coming in from Kenya. So shout out to Kenya. Jazaa K'Allah Khayr. We appreciate everyone. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. It really helps us out. And to download your free copy of the compatibility guide.
Yes.
Yeah. And is there anything else?
Links are below.
So Jazaa K'Allah Khayr. Have a wonderful weekend. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.